welcome to Hudson Institute. I'm Ken Weinstein, President and CEO of Hudson Institute. This has obviously been a momentous week in Indian-U.S. relations, and we're especially honored to have His Excellency Arun Singh, the Ambassador of India to the United States. This is apparently your one little bit of a day off in what has undoubtedly been the busiest week since you've been ambassador here. This was, of course, Prime Minister Modi's fourth visit to the United States, his third U.S.-India bilateral summit. I was particularly honored to be among the think tank heads who were given the rare opportunity to meet and brief the Prime Minister on Tuesday evening. The highlight of the week, obviously, was his address to the joint session of Congress, at least the public highlight, in addition to excellent discussions with the President and the nuclear plant agreement that has been reached. At that speech, Speaker Ryan referred to India as a pillar of strength in an important region of the world. Obviously, the United States and India share a great deal in common: dedication to democracy, pluralism, liberty, and equality. And the Prime Minister referred to the United States as an indispensable partner and as a temple of democracy. Our panel today looks at an increasingly important facet of political life here in the United States, and we're apparently, I think, the first think tank panel on this subject. It's the political mobilization of Indian Americans. Prime Minister Modi spoke of the important role that Indian Americans play in our democracy and in our society. Let me quote him directly from his speech: "Connecting our two nations is also a unique and dynamic bridge of 3 million Indian Americans. Today, they are among your best CEOs, academics, astronauts, scientists, economists, doctors, even spelling bee champions. They are your strength. They are also the pride of India. They symbolize the best of both our societies." And I think our panelists today, I think you will all agree, exemplify that to a T. We have Congressman Bera from California. We have two delegates from Maryland, Runa Miller and Dr. Jay Dolisi, who called the Congressman also Dr. Bera as well. And we also have Shekhar Narasimhan, who is an entrepreneur and chairman of the Asian American and Pacific Islanders Victory Fund, who's been an active participant in American civic life and also a economist, a housing economist in his own right. And the panel today is going to be moderated by Hudson Institute Adjunct Fellow Dr. Maina Singh, who is an Adjunct Fellow here at Hudson. She's also a scholar in residence at the School of International Studies at American University. She has widely lectured at major universities around the world, including Oxford, Cambridge, Yale, and so forth. Her academic background is on international and cross-cultural diaspora experiences, identity, cross-cultural communication. She focused during her time living in Israel on the Indian Jewish community in Israel, and did some comprehensive studies on the migration experiences of Indian Jewish communities to Israel. Her current project now, which she is undertaking, focuses precisely on the engagement of Indian Americans in U.S. politics and policy. So it's with great pleasure that I turn it over to Dr. Singh.
Good afternoon, namaskar. President Ken Weinstein, I'm deeply honored that you have made the time to be here. I also appreciate the presence of Ambassador Arun K. Singh. These are people who have many other things to do, and in appreciation of their being here, I would like to recognize them. I'm delighted to see so many people attending here. I also see familiar faces here, young people who had conversations with me about getting fired up about joining politics. They're of Indian American origin. I would like to recognize Anurag Verma. I would like to recognize Vikram Iyer. I would like to recognize Jay Kansara, Tanveer Kathabala, and others. If I cannot see you, forgive me for that. I would also like to recognize Dr. Mahinder Tak, who was my first entry point into meeting young political aspirants, and I appreciate the support that she has always given, also in partnership with somebody I have on the panel here. So Dr. Ken Weinstein actually stole my opening line about beginning with Prime Minister Modi's speech, and he actually spoke about the 3.2 million Indian Americans, saying, "You are the pride of India." And when he said that, the resounding applause that followed from members of America's political leadership is a sign that their constituents of Indian American heritage are indeed a community being acknowledged, appreciated, and even admired today. Their financial and professional successes, work ethics, family values are the typical staple of such appreciation. But what about influence? Not just buying and selling companies, but shaping policy, running for office, demanding from those who hold elected office in their regions. Despite the lip-sing-songs election in the 1950s and the appointment of Governors Jindal 2007, Healy from 2010, the Indian American political journey has been slow. There could be many reasons for that. First generation is typically diaspora, which is looking at basic integration, economic integration, betterment for their children, and therefore politics seems to be a far cry. That was also the story for many of the Indian Americans. 1965, the Nationality Act brought in very qualified academics, scientists, engineers, and so on, who did extremely well, but politics was far away from their minds. It is their children that we are looking at then, fundamentally. However, if wielding political clout is the last bastion through which an immigrant community bids for its place at the table, then I believe that the Indian American community today is poised at a key moment of transition and assertion, no longer shy of politics and shy of risk-taking. There is a generational shift too. We have examples today from across the US. In California, Kamala Harris is running for US Senate. In Washington State, Pramila Jayapal is running for US Congress. In California, again, Ro Khanna is running for Congress. In Chicago, Radha Krishnamurthy, who has just been endorsed by President Obama. In Louisiana, Abhay Patel, a Republican, is running for the US Senate. Some candidates are quite young. In the past few weeks, I have met two very determined young women, Kesha Ram, who is running for Lieutenant Governor in Vermont, and Jennifer Rajkumar, who is running in Lower Manhattan for local office in New York. Our objective today is firstly to foreground this enhanced political buzz and hear some voices from within, which we hope will generate ideas for action, maybe even a conference. It's time, I think, to see more Indian American panels in the DC discussion circles. Secondly, to understand the policy implications of this shifting paradigm in voting, in funding, and in issue-based consolidations among the Indian American community. I have a very distinguished panel here. Congressman Ami Bera is the only Indian American currently serving in the Congress 7th Congressional District, the furthest away from me. We are waiting to see how long he can spend here. If he has to leave early, that's because he needs to vote, and that's more important than his being here. So we will pose our first question to him. That's part of the pact. He serves on the House Committee on Science, Space and Technology, on the House Committee on Foreign Affairs, and the Congressional Caucus on India and Indian Americans. Next to Congressman Bera is Delegate Aruna Miller, who has represented Montgomery County in Maryland House of Delegates since 2010. She's a member of the Ways and Means Committee. I keep using the dates that they may have won the elections. 2010 is when she won, and as she informed me, 2011 is when she joined. So if there's a discrepancy in the years I quote, it could be the year that they have won elections, as opposed to the year that they actually joined in January or February. Next to Delegate Aruna Miller is Delegate Jay Jalisi. Delegate Jay Jalisi has represented Baltimore County. He has represented Baltimore County in Maryland House of Delegates since 2015. He serves on the Environment and Transportation Committee as well as the Judiciary Committee. To my right is Mr. Shekhar Narasimhan, Managing Partner at Beekman Advisors, Chairman of Is it Papillon or Papillon?
Papillon.
Okay, I stand corrected. And the co-founder of the Emergent Institute in Bangalore, India. He's been appointed Commissioner on the President's Advisory Commission on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. He's chairman and founder of the first ever Asian American super PAC, the RP Victory Fund, which is what we will talk to him about. He is also, in that sense, first generation of the Indian Americans who came in after 1965. So he does represent another point in the history of the community here. And so his perspectives are going to be very valuable as we go forward. We keep hearing about the doctors and engineers and tech people in the Indian American community, and we keep saying, oh, those are stereotypes. You know what? On this panel, I have 2 medical doctors and 2 engineers. And they're all in politics. All right. So I should also add at this point that I'm not a policy person. I teach from a sociological perspective. I teach courses on diaspora and identity. And in the last 8 years, I've been very closely associated with the School of International Service at American University, where I teach courses on diaspora. I've had the experience to learn from a lot of millennials, both of Indian American origin and otherwise, and discussions about how they see themselves within politics in the US and how they view the world outside. I have learned much from them. I have also learned a lot from the Indian American community and through my exposure to them, which has been very wide and across the country in many different regions. I've had the privilege of meeting with Indian American communities from anything like occasions where there might be felicitating somebody who was run for office. It might be a meeting of an organization like the RP, which is the Conference of the Physicians, or the hoteliers, who are also now organized into a fairly strong lobby, and they have a PAC, and Anurag at some point will make an intervention about that as we break into Q&A. My exposure to the Indian American community and my special connections with many of the second generation have taught me much about the way the community is evolving, changing, and shifting. And that is what fascinates me. So it is that which brings me to this. I have probably by now had at least 100 interview conversations with Indian Americans on this subject. I have a little disclaimer here that our panelists on stage should not signal a deliberate political leaning. To begin with, I'm not Indian American. I vote in India, so I have no political stakes in who should be at the table. There were also cancellations, and we were not able to get people who were not in town. Our panel was basically going to be from the vicinity, because we were not doing a bigger conference, which I hope that we will do at some point. Congressman Bera is the only sitting member of Congress. How could we not have him? I'm so honored that he's in town. But the others, all of us on stage here, are people who live in the vicinity. I have, of course, been aware of this, and therefore decided that we would like to make this event use a crowdsourcing model. So I have 2 people in the audience who will respond with a Republican perspective. And so we will, at the end of it, have a very nuanced discussion, I hope. So my first question in respecting your time, Congressman Bera, is to you. And I remember how your election generated so much excitement in the Indian American community. Your success represented a moment when Indian Americans believed that their aspiration, political aspiration, was realizable. So keeping that in mind, today as we move from aspiration to goals, you're able to see the big picture. What would you set as a 5-year goal for the Indian American community to become a political force?
I think a couple things. If I think about my own story, my parents immigrated here in the 1950s. I was born and raised in California, lifelong Californian. So I grew up fully immersed in the American experience, but also rooted in the values that my family brought with them, values of hard work, values of building for the next generation. And when I ran for Congress, I've run on those stories. So I've not run away from my cultural background, but I've run on that cultural background. And I think that's an important lesson. Because the values of family, hard work, building for the next generation are not Indian American values, they're American values that resound. My district is less than 1% Indian American, less than 8% Asian American. So it is a district that is reflective of the United States. It also is the most evenly split district in the country, 40% Democratic, 40% Republican. So I don't run as a Democrat or Republican. I run on the values and the things that I care about. So as we build that pipeline of the next generation, I think we have to run on who we are and what we contribute to the fabric of American society. So strategically, though, if we're thinking about how we broaden this, something that I think Shaker will touch on, within all of Congress, there's really 14 voting AAPI members. And really, if you want to have influence on your values, the things you care about, whether that's higher education, public education, giving everyone a fair shot, a fair immigration system, you have to strategically probably get to about 25 to 30 members who can then move legislation in a block. So people have heard me talk about strategically thinking about electing 6 AAPI members in 16, 8 AAPI members in 2018, so 6 and 16, 8 and 18, and 10 and 20. So then you can get to a robust number of about 30 individuals with shared values, shared goals, and then you can start to influence legislation. But I think we have to be systematic and strategic. In this election cycle, you just named off 4 potential Indian Americans that could get elected. Kamala Harris in the Senate, Ro Khanna, Raja Krishnamurthy, Pramila Jayapal. So this could be a banner year in terms of expanding influence. Secondly, Indian Americans have to, and Asian Americans more broadly, have to participate and vote, right? I mean, certainly support candidates, but get out there and actually actively participate and vote. And you may see at the presidential level, and again, we'll hear from Shaker some of the strategies, but there are districts and precincts where the Indian American vote or the Asian American vote can actually move the needle. So making sure we're recognizing those, we're reaching out to those communities, and we're actually actively talking to those communities, which is incredibly important.
So would you have a goal of 5 years from now? How many in Congress?
Well, the goal then, so I got 6 and 16, 8 and 18, 10 and 20. So within the broader AAPI community, if we can get to the Congressional Asian Pacific Islander Caucus to get to 30 members, then you actually have the ability. We saw 40 or so committed members on the Republican side bring the speaker down. So you can move and influence legislation on things that we care about.
So the 2 really important things from your remarks that I take away. One is the importance of authenticity, which is embracing the heritage and working with that. In your example, you say has been successful in that, and that's what you would urge as an important thing: is don't be somebody else that you're not, and that works with the electoral constituencies. And the second thing is interesting. I will add a footnote for people who may not be aware of the movements that are going on. That I keep using the word Indian American, but there is this Indian American, Hindu American, Asian American identity spectrum. And people identify at different levels with that. And in terms of political strategy, there's a shift, discernible shift among many who are strategizing and thinking consciously of where to go, is to say that yes, the Indian Americans have wealth, they have skills, they have many other things going for them, but they don't have the numbers. So if you're trying to move the needle, you have to work for strategies that help that issue. And so API is the short for Asian American and Pacific Islanders. Now I know from conversations that many young Indian Americans who are politically very conscious have gone back to their parents and said, you know, you have to join RP, and they said, are you kidding? What do I have in common with somebody who came from Hawaii? I'm Indian. So I think those things are happening, but there is clearly a shift in many more Indian Americans who are born in the US are more comfortable with that Pan-Asian identification, and we'll have more of that from Shekhar as we come. But these are wonderful segues into bringing the conversation to a more localized experience. And I want to turn to you, Aruna, now about your experience of having successfully contested and won, and now you've been, it's your second term. At the level of getting votes and getting people to come and vote, how important is heritage, and does gender matter?
Well, absolutely. So thank you very much, Dr. Singh, for hosting today's event. And I want to thank each of you for being here, being engaged and wanting to learn more about Indian Americans and their role in politics. So when I first got elected, it was in 2010. I was born in India and arrived to this country in the 1970s. So you can imagine being first generation. I didn't grow up speaking about politics at the kitchen table. My parents and us were trying to, fit into this, as strangers in a strange world. So really what we were trying to do is integrate ourselves. So much of my adult life, I wasn't really engaged in politics until I became a citizen. And I did vote. And I remember during one of those elections, it wasn't enough that I just voted. I thought I was being engaged just because I voted. I realized it took a lot more than that. It took us being actively engaged. Politics, as you know, is a contact sport. So you need to go and be engaged, be active, go knock on doors for local elected officials. And that's how I got engaged, is by volunteering for a certain party that I represent. And eventually, one thing led to another, because when you volunteer and start at the grassroots level, you tend to meet a lot of your local elected officials. So I represent the area of Montgomery County, which includes Potomac, Germantown, Clarksburg region. And I do see a friendly face here, my constituent, Dr. Todd, so it's nice to see you here. So when I started to volunteer with the Democratic Party, I had no intention of ever running for public office. The idea of that was just so far from my spectrum of any possibility that could happen. First of all, I'm an engineer, and engineers don't typically end up in the role of policy making. So what happened was, because I was engaged with the local elected officials, there was an opening that came up in our area, and they actually approached me. I got a phone call, and somebody said on the other side, we'd like you to run for political office. What do you think? My immediate reaction, as gender goes, was, no. Are you kidding? Why would you ask me? I'm not ready for that. I don't know what it's like to be a delegate. And I hung up the phone. So my husband, who tends to be a lot wiser than me at times, took me aside and he said, Aruna, let's talk about this a little bit. You've been a public servant your entire life, being an engineer. So why is it that you wouldn't take on this opportunity to run for public office? And I said, well, and I started going through all the reasons that typically go through people's mind. What if I lose? He goes, okay, that's the worst thing that can happen. What if you lose? You're not the first person to lose, and you'll get up, pick yourself up, and move on. He said, what's the best thing that can happen? I said, wow, yeah, I get to represent the people of Maryland. I get to be part of history. I get to, implement policy making that affects people beyond myself. And he said, isn't that worth taking a chance on? Yes, it is. So my lesson I learned from that question and the answer and the action I took is life begins at the end of our comfort zone. And so I decided to run for public office. And fortunately for me, as a woman and a woman of color, the chances of me getting elected are far smaller than, let's say, a man and people of different race and background. We know in this country that while women represent 51% of the population, we still are only 18% of elected office at the federal level 24% at the state level, and governors, I think we represent 10%. So clearly we are underrepresented in this area. So in my case, I think the success of me being able to get elected the first time was because we have what's called, I don't know if you ever heard this term, slating. So if you have certain members of your party, that you will, join forces together, share resources, do the mailings together, share volunteers. So that's what we decided to do in my case. As a result of that, these were elected officials that are already gotten elected. So their knowledge, their experience, their outreach helped me to get elected. So I think if I didn't have that type of support system for me, I wouldn't have been able to get elected. So I'm very grateful for the, all the help that I received, not only from other elected officials, but the Indian American community also banded together and came out, supported me. They were excited to see an Indian American being elected in Maryland General Assembly. And actually, in the entire nation, I believe Maryland has the highest percentage of Indian Americans to the state legislature. Currently, we have 3, so we're very proud of that. So Dr. Jay DeLacy and Delegate Kumar Garve and myself, so we have 3. So having said that, does gender matter? Absolutely it does. I don't think we are where we need to be. Does race matter? Absolutely. I think we still need to move that needle further. So thank you.
Excellent. So, thank you for sharing your personal experience and so warmly and so candidly. So, I don't know, the importance of mentoring comes out directly, because we're also trying to have this conversation to see where we can take young aspirants to think. Personal stories are very empowering, they're also very inspiring. But does the community need to do more to, for example, set up networks where they can create those mentoring spaces? The ones that you found where you were lucky. You were about to give up that option and then your husband said, wait a minute, and then you came round. But a lot of Indian American young people whose parents in any case are probably saying, hey, why politics? You have a job in the government, you're an engineer, keep it. I've had conversations with people who said, I was saying I'm going to address this big meeting of the community, and they said, you know what, why don't you become a doctor? It would be so nice. So it goes on that way. So do you suggest that the community should be making stronger efforts at that?
Absolutely. So the great thing about at least the Maryland legislature, unlike Congressman Bera here, is that you can continue to be whatever profession you want, whether it's a physician, doctor, teacher, firefighter, because the Maryland legislature is a citizen legislature. That means it's part-time. So January through April, we take a leave of absence from our full-time job and go serve in Annapolis full-time 90 days. After April, you come back, you go back to your regular job, and you continue to serve as a legislator on a part-time basis. So it's really the best of both worlds that you have in this role. And whether or not, go ahead and be a physician or engineer or whatever field it is, policy making, I realize, affects every one of us, no matter what our profession is. And I often tell our community this. A lot of times when I meet with immigrant communities, they'll tell me, politics, oh, that's so complex, it's boring. And I say, you know what? You may not be interested in politics, but politics is very interested in you. And here's why. Because from the moment you wake up in the morning, the water that you're drinking, is it clean or is it not? That's policy making. Look what's happening in Flint, Michigan. The schools that you send your kids to, do they have sufficient funds? That's policy makers that are making those decisions. The roads that you're driving on, do you have the infrastructure there? Policy making. How much taxes you're paying? Policy making. And whether or not our country is at war or at peace, policy making. That's why it matters that we need to be engaged, no matter what our profession is. So thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to move to Delegate Jay DeLacy, who has a similar experience. Maryland, won elections. He's not born in the US, but not like Aruna, who was a little child. He actually came, he was educated and raised in India. And he told me a story a few days ago which was very fascinating. He said that most of his volunteers in his area were in fact not Indian American. And he added a little bit more, which I want him to speak about here. And so I want you to reflect, Dr. Jalesi, who left his medical practice, by the way, lucrative like medical practice, and joined politics. So I want you to reflect on the issue of acceptance, that you came in very late. So how has it been for you to be accepted at the local level, to be voted in? And what would be some of the lessons you will learn to tell young people who are hesitating?
So my experience was, and this is my first term, this is my 18th month in office, as having been elected to the Maryland General Assembly. As Aruna said, we have a South Asian caucus with Aruna and I and Kumar Barwe. I'm the first, I think the first immigrant elected from my county, which is Baltimore County of Maryland, with a very small South Asian community. And I was active with the Democratic politics, and I kept my issues which reflect or which connect with everyone: jobs, safety, and education. And my feeling was that if I talk about issues which are important for everyone, better education, better jobs, and safety in our neighborhoods, it would connect with everyone, whether you are South Asian, Indian, African American, whatever. And I ran a very grassroots campaign. I was not in anyone's slate on the Democratic Party, even though I was running as a Democrat, and nobody was interested in taking me on their slate or didn't think I could win. So for the longest time, I think, and that worked for my favor till about 2 weeks before the elections, everybody thought he's crazy, he's going to lose anyway. So don't pay attention to him. About 2 weeks before the election, they realized, when they started getting a feedback, and we have what's called the early voting in Maryland. When people started showing up for early voting, they realized that everybody wanted to have a picture taken with me on early voting centers, and nobody else. And obviously I'm not that good looking, so it must have been my work. So and especially the kids. And that was because I had so many signs out on all the Desi gas stations that I had almost become a small celebrity in my district. And so every child would drag his or her mom over to me and say, I want to have a picture taken with him. And then obviously mothers never deny their kids whatever they want, so they would have a picture taken with me. And then I started giving a little assignment to their kids. Make sure your mom votes for me inside. And the mom would take the kid inside in the polling booth, and the kid would come out and say, oh, my mom voted for you. And so that's when people realized that I could actually win. And so I won the Democratic primary. I got the highest number of votes of any freshman running, and I had 9 people running in that election for 3 seats, but really there were 2 because there was an incumbent. And then after I won the Democratic primary, then the Democratic Party refused to take me on their slate, and they formed a slate with other people. And I ran again, alone, and I won again. And so then they realized that, this guy really has some grassroots game. And here's how I did it, and I think anybody can do it, it's not rocket science, is you go and talk to the people. So of the 9 people running in my race, I door knocked, that's every door. I think between the 9 people and I did more doors, I talked to more people, I did more community events than anyone else, or all of them combined. And that's what makes the difference, is how you interact with people. You can have the biggest war chest, and we saw this in Maryland, a governor's race, that the losing candidate had 3 or 4 times more money than the guy who's the governor now. It's not about the money, it's about the issues, it's about your compassion for what you want to do, and people can see through you whether you are sincere or just making up. And in my case, it worked, and I continue to do this, and that's how I've maintained my relationship with my community, which is my electorate, that people say you never ended your campaign. It's been 18 months, and since I've won, I've done 8 town hall meetings. Nobody's doing it. I've done 2 community events in Annapolis, which Aruna has been in them, and they've always been packed, and every event I have done so far in my district has always been packed. And that just shows people usually don't like to come to political events. They come when they feel connected to you. And each one of my events is always packed, and I'm really grateful. And I also pay attention, and I go across religious lines. I'm the only Muslim of South Asian descent in any elected office, whether it's state assembly or federal. So, but I go across, and so my main support really comes from churches. And of the 200 people who worked on election day in the primary, because it's a heavily Democratic district, so that was my real election, I think 3 were Indian Americans, and 197 were from churches, different churches. And I went to the churches, and they were doing prayers for me, and they were doing announcing to their congregations, and black churches predominantly. And I was never a member of any church, and especially the churches where they were doing the prayers for me. It's because they felt that anyone who's elected to office, if I get elected to office, it's not only good for me and my South Asian community, but it's also good for them because they will have an honest broker in elected office for their district. And that's how we do it. We make connections on the basis of issues. And that's what I think is the way to go. You can organize your community as much as possible, but at the end of the day, it is the general masses who should be convinced that you would do the right thing by them. And that's what I suggest.
Dr. Jalisi, are you sure your medical school didn't have courses on government and politics?
No, but unlike Aruna, I have family in India who have been MP, who has been an MP, and then my aunt married someone in Pakistan, and he's an MNA. But my own experience in politics was I got elected to Johns Hopkins Student Council. That was it.
So, yes, Congressman Bera has to leave, and for a greater cause, we will just give him an applause and say thank you. It's an honor to have you. Thank you. And I want to see more people on our